Well, I hope Punk Patriot will accept this as a video response. Hello. I have a slightly different take on this whole gun control issue because I don't think it is a zero-sum game. It is actually a very complicated issue. So let me start off by saying that I'm not a member of the NRA. I do, and I might point out as well that I consider myself to be a progressive. Okay, so I'm not my critique doesn't come from the conservative camp, in other words. My critique comes from a slightly different perspective. Basically an independent perspective, you might call it. So, in terms of regulating gun sales, and I'm talking strictly about America here, okay? I'm in favor of sensible regulation, but what that regulation should actually look like is a matter of great detail. Now, most of the gun violence in the United States, the homicide, the homicide rates, and so on in the United States is not due to assault rifles, as they're commonly called. In other words, military-type assault weapons. But it's actually due to handguns, to much smaller weapons with a much lower capacity. You can look at the crime statistics in every major city in America, to find out that these are the facts. And despite what we hear in the mainstream media regarding the danger of assault weapons, even though they do kill a lot of people once somebody takes up those arms, these are the minority of incidents in America. This is just for starters. Now, I'm not necessarily in favor of just, every person being able to own an assault weapon. I am in favor, however, for private gun ownership. If you don't, it doesn't force you to own a gun. It just means that people who want to own one should have one, depending on certain safeguards, which would include, a sensible background check. Okay? So, the unrestricted availability of any gun, whether it's an assault rifle or any other kind of gun, at gun shows, so to speak, needs to be sensibly regulated. Responsible gun owners with no criminal record in the past should be able to own a weapon. That doesn't mean they should be able to own a tank or a rocket launcher, but it is a convincing argument to me that people should be able to own a weapon. That doesn't mean they have to have, are licensed to have some sort of an arsenal of any kind. But yes, I think that makes sense to me. I also recognize that many of these gun accidents which happen in homes are actually happening in homes with responsible or so-called responsible gun owners. Okay, so this is another question that we need to discuss. The fantasy, this fantasy that an armed populace is going to stop a tyrannical government, especially as technologically sophisticated as some of our governments are today, is essentially a fantasy, because that war isn't going to be fought via armed confrontation. It's going to be fought within the war of ideas, basically. So if some, technologically advanced nations such as ours, if the government becomes tyrannical and just wants to crush all dissenting opinion and wants to crush, individual gun owners and even people with sophisticated weapons such as assault rifles, they can very easily take out an entire city block in a matter of minutes. Okay, so this is not the argument here. And the argument coming from the so-called patriot movement in this regard is, in my opinion, just very naive. This said, you have to be very realistic about a complete breakdown in civil law within our society. And at that point, you have no one else to protect you or your family other than yourself. You're the person who has to defend whatever, your food supply, your home. This is not an unrealistic scenario, if you ask me. It is within the realm of possibility. And so I don't think it's a good idea for progressives to be completely anti-gun. This is, the stark reality of the situation. In an idealistic society, nobody should even have to own a gun. Nobody should have to own any weapons of any kind, and the war of ideas would win out over everything else. But sadly, that has never been the case within the entire history of humanity, I might add. So, in a way, I guess I'm sort of trying to reach out to, some of my more conservative viewers to my channel, is that no, I'm not advocating trying to take away anybody's guns. That is certainly not the case. On the other hand, I'm very troubled about irresponsible gun ownership in America. And that includes, by definition, people who have come home completely disillusioned from the wars abroad and who take matters into their own hands when it comes to their beefs with government or with society as a whole. The perfect example for this was actually Timothy McVeigh. And I have to tell you that while I do not condone his actions in any way, there was a very interesting interview of why he came to the position he held, and what made him the person that he became. And it was revealed in an interview that Gore Vidal did with Timothy McVeigh. Now, you can probably find this somewhere on the internet, okay? It was very revealing. Because Timothy McVeigh simply used the same logic that the American government and military basically ingrained into him. And he followed this through to its very tragic and logical end. Logic, meaning by the logic of the military. It's a very sad chapter in American history. You need to see the motivations of why people do things, what enticed them to do stuff, without ridiculing somebody completely up front. This doesn't mean you support mass killings, terrorism, or anything like that. You need to understand the mindset behind it and what prompted that mindset in the first place. So I believe that, an assault weapons ban in America is not going to solve the problem overall. What we're dealing with is a very complicated culture here in the United States, which constantly says freedom and liberty as long, as you don't infringe on my liberty and so on. And the actual balance between your individual rights and the common good. That is the larger question here. So, some of us are trying to resolve this issue by working together with people who are not right-wing extremists or left-wing extremists. These problems have to be solved slowly. They cannot happen overnight. So I guess that's my addition to this whole debate, because it is not a zero-sum game. And in closing, I'd have to add, I wanted to make a little remark about Switzerland and gun ownership in Switzerland. Now, the example of Switzerland within the gun debate here is a bit misplaced, because first of all, in Switzerland, it's a different society from ours, because first of all, they have very, very liberal laws in terms of universal health care, in terms of, taking care of the community, in contrast to individual gun ownership. So there is a sort of a balance there. On the other hand, regardless of the safety of Swiss citizens in their own homes, I might also add that Switzerland has banking laws which are shielding some of the biggest financial criminals on the planet. So that does not exactly speak well for the country of Switzerland in a national context. I guess, everything has its downside. So I just wanted to point out this is not a zero-sum game. And we can come to some middle ground on this. Good night.